Hello everyone and welcome back to our channel Code with GoldenCat. Today we'll be talking about another commonly used directive in Vue, that is v-for. Now this directive is used to render a list of items by iterating over an array or object. It's commonly used in components to dynamically generate elements based on data. Now a v-for directive is very similar to a for loop in different programming languages. Now if you're not aware what a for loop does, let's quickly go over an example to demonstrate its use. So now in our starter project, we have this index.html that creates an input text box and then an add button. In our app.js file, we simply have an input value that is two-way binded to the input text box as shown here. And then we have a list of items that has egg and milk in it. Now suppose if I want to render these elements in my HTML page, how can I do that? So the first approach that I can take is to define an unordered list and then define the list items as items 0, that is the index, then copy it again and paste it, item 1. Now if I reload my HTML page, it's rendering egg and milk here. Now the problem with this approach is that it's too much statically defined. Suppose if we add another item into this list, let's just say water, and then re-render the page, it doesn't get reflected here. We have to statically type it again in the list item to make it visible like this. And then it works. Now, statically defining every element in the list element is quite impossible in a production application. So for that, we are using a for loop here or v-for directive. So how can we do that is instead of passing the element like this, we can type in v-for and then create a for loop over items, that is our array, and then we would pick each item of that array. So this line item in items is essentially picking every single element from that array one by one. Now to render that, we can simply type in item here and then reload my web page. And as you can see, it's still working as expected. Now here, I have an add button here as well that has a clicked event listener that is connected to a method called add item, which would simply add the item or whatever value is typed in here into the items list or items array. So if I type in, let's just say T and click on add, it adds an item into this. And as you can also see, it re-renders the list of items here. So if I add anything else like bread, click on add, it keeps adding it into this. If I open the developer console and go to my unordered list, now suppose if I'm adding anything in it like gravy, click on OK. You can see it's not re-rendering the whole list. It only adds another list item into the list. So this is how Vue efficiently re-renders elements using a v-for. Now, instead of only accessing the item's value, I can also access their indexes as well. So for doing that, I can simply add a parenthesis here, and then inside of it, I can type in index. You can name it anything you want. And then here, I can simply type in index. Now if I reload this page, you can see all of the item elements and their indexes are being rendered right now. If I add any other element like T, so it gets added at the end of the array with an index 3. Now you can also use this v-for directive with complex array of objects or objects itself. So for that, let's go into our app.js file and comment this out. And then type in items And then first we'll create an object that has name key that has a value of GoldenCat, and then age that has a value of 30. Now first I'll go into my index.html, and while working with the objects, there is a little bit of difference with this item comma indexes syntax. So if I reload my web page, you can see the item has the item value, that is correct, that is GoldenCat and 30, but index has a value of name and age. That is the keys here, name and age. So for accessing the indexes, I can simply type in comma, and the second property would become key. uh, And then I can again access their keys like this. And now you can access the item's value, their key, and their indexes as well. Now you can also work with an array of complex objects as well, similarly, and you can also use a v-for loop for iterating over a number of elements. So if I create another unordered list that has a list items with v-for equal to num in 10, and then num, you can see it renders 1 through 10 integers here. Now let's remove this for now and reload our web page. And let's revert this back as well. Now here we already have the functionality to add items into that list. So let me reload this. Now suppose if I also want to add the functionality to remove elements from that list, how can I do that? So for that, I can add a click listener on this list element that has click equal to, and then remove items. And then to this function, we would be passing an index of the element that we want to remove. So we can call it like this. And then in our app.js, we need to create a new method called remove item. And then we can simply type in this dot items dot splice, that is a JavaScript function, index comma 1. If I reload this again, you can see if I click on any of the elements, it gets removed. Now that we understand how a v-for works, let's also talk about a problem associated with v-for directive. So there is a bug here, and to demonstrate that bug, I'll need to create an input box here. So let's clear it out a bit. We do not need key and indexes for now. Or actually, we will need the index part. And we can just remove these from here. Okay. Now here, I'll add an input text box here. And now if I reload this web page, you can see all of the elements or list item elements have an input text box here. If I'm clicking on it, it gets deleted because this click event listener is being applied on this as well. So to stop that, I can simply type in @click dot stop. Now, if you're not aware of what this does, I suggest you watch our previous videos in which I have already defined this event. So now if I reload this again and click on it, it doesn't get deleted now. But if I click on the element, it gets deleted. So now the problem is, suppose if I type in anything like hello in it and then delete this, you can see egg had the hello in the input parameter, but now milk has the input parameter as hello. Again, as you can see here, milk has the input value as hello and water has the input value as nothing. If I click on milk, that gets it deleted. This is problematic because water now has an input value of hello. So why is this happening? The problem lies in how Vue works efficiently with v-for. So Vue doesn't actually re-renders the whole list item. It actually just copies the data of a list item into another list item. So if I reload this again, and now if I click on it, this gets deleted. But instead of re-rendering everything these two elements have, it actually deletes this element and then copies the data of milk and water into this. But it keeps the data that was here in this input text box. Now, to solve this problem, we have a simple approach of adding another directive here or another attribute here, that is key. Now, this has to be binded with something related to that item. So you might be thinking that we could use index, but then index gets changed when you remove an item. So instead of using index, we can simply use item here. In a production application, you would have IDs or GUIDs or integer IDs for a particular complex object in through which you can set the key value. But here we'll simply take the item. Now, if I reload this again and type in hello and then delete this, now the problem is not here anymore. Now this happening because the list items have a key now that uniquely identifies each list item element, and that is why it does not get duplicated into the next list item's input text field. So in most of the production application, you would see this key attribute being used with the v-for directive. And it's also a good practice to always use this with v-for directive. So this pretty much it for the Vue v-for directive. If you have any questions related to this, you can let me know in the comment sections down below. As always, we'll end this video with a quote that says, "Losers quit when they fail. Winners fail until they succeed." Thank you for watching and have a great day.